Hey guys, in today's video we're going to go over how to perform a wireless site survey in a warehouse logistics environment. I'm also going to talk about how to set up a Cisco Meraki network in a warehouse environment, switches, and access points. Come here. So this video is for Richard and Mo out in Dubai. I know you guys were asking me a couple of questions about WMS, warehouse management setup for a wireless environment. So here it is. So on my flipboard, hopefully you can see this, guys. Let's say this is a 200,000 square foot warehouse. I think yours is about 180,000 square foot warehouse. So over here you have your office area. So let's say your MDF is located in this area. So obviously you probably have one Meraki or Cisco MS switch, right? So you have branches that come over here for your office users. Maybe you have a 48 port switch. Now what you want to do, you can use this main switch. Out in the warehouse, I'd probably have, I always like to go with redundant switches, maybe 2 switches. So right now we're actually using 3 switches throughout this whole warehouse. So I'll give you an example for people who are new to designing warehouse management systems, wireless APs, so on. So what I used to see, because of the, an IT person's budget or a company's budget, this is what they do. They have one switch here, then they have an access point, some links here, some links. These are, let's say these are copper lines, Cat6, an access point, an access point, an access point, an access point, an AP, an AP. So does anyone see the problem with this? What happens here is, and then you got one fiber link here. Now, how many points of failure do you have here? I see a bunch. This fiber link goes down. What happens to all of these access points? All of these access points go down. So all of your users, your RF scanners, everything that is connected to these access points, they go down. So you have a bunch of people that are getting paid anywhere from, let's say, $15 an hour to $25 an hour. They all go home. So basically you're losing a lot of money for that in a single day. Another part here is you have no redundant switches. This switch goes down. All of these APs in this area are down again. So let's just go back to what I was doing before, the original drawing. So you have your MDF here. I would typically look at putting a switch here, maybe a switch here, and a switch here. And then I would have access points throughout the building. Now, the amount of access points really depends on how you want to implement your warehouse. Is there voice involved, or is it just data, or is it a combination of both? Is it running off of 2.4 gigahertz? Is it running off of 5? So there's a lot of factors to consider, because with 2.4, sure, you can get a lot more coverage, but just less bandwidth. But also, again, 2.4 is very crowded and congested. So when I'm setting up my systems, I always recommend 5, separate VLAN, less noise, more channels to use. So back to designing this, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3 switches, and then I'm also going to utilize this 4 switch. So what I would typically do is have this kind of set up. So I've got one copper line going here, Cat6. This one would come along here. Maybe this is going to go over here. It's a little messy, but if you see what I'm doing here, I'm giving multiple points of failure or redundancy within this network. So let's say if this switch goes down, then at least that switch is still up, and it's serving, let's say, this side of the warehouse, and all of my users here can still get access, right? And even if you had your DB or your power of your antenna, your access point only transmitting at a certain level of power, we can easily boost this based on your site survey. If you did your site survey at 25 milliwatts or 50 milliwatts or 50% of the power, right now you're giving coverage like this. If this AP goes down, what we can do is we can boost this to 75 milliwatts, 100, to compensate for the lost coverage that this is getting. So if we need to boost this access point, this access point to cover for the downfall of this, we can say, hey, AP, you're going from 25, let's boost you up to 75. And then your coverage might have looked like this, but since we boost it, maybe it's going to look like that. Sorry, it's getting messy, guys. But again, now for your switches that are in the warehouse, what I've seen some people do, I'm going to change the color. Okay, they would do this. Fiber, 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 fiber. Now what happens with this link gets cut. These are all point of failures. Everything goes down. So easiest solution, if you don't have enough SFP ports on your main switch, get a distribution switch that can allow or that can handle that. Usually most switches are only going to have like 2 SFP ports. I wouldn't recommend connecting copper directly into your switches. Switches are meant to be carrying a lot of traffic, so you want to have a distribution switch. So at least, you know, the model, if you're looking for a Meraki distribution switch, it's like the MS425, 416. They could handle all 10 gigs. So what you're going to do is you're going to have nothing daisy chained like that. You're going to have all of your fiber links going straight into the distribution switch. Just like that. So let me erase this, and now we'll talk about the access point setup. That was just an overview of fiber cabling, what to do, redundancy. So MDF here. What I would do for access points when I'm doing my site survey, I like to do it at 5 and 2.4 just to kind of get heat maps to show that, hey, if you're doing 2.4, this is what your heat maps would look like. And if you do it on 5, this is what it's going to look like. So on your site survey, always perform it at 50%. Never perform your site survey at 100, because if stuff changes in a warehouse and you're getting minus 78 or minus 75 RSSI here, like this, something changes within this area or in this aisle, that minus 75 becomes minus 100. Pretty much no signal, no RSSI. So the reason why you do your site survey, you know, at 50% is just to compensate for unknown factors, or kind of just as a fail-safe. So access point wise, this is your typical warehouse. I like to have everything in redundancy. I might have an access point here and here, this fashion. And let's say you needed to cover these areas. What I like to do is, if there was no AP here, I would like to put one right here, just so you have kind of like line of sight. But then you'd also get coverage from here and here, right? So some installers, you know, some contractors that we use for cabling, they'd actually misplace this access point and actually have it over here. But no, that makes a big difference, because, you know, the line of sight is going into an aisle, which is wrong. I want this access point right here, just to cover here and also here and here. So another thing that I get a lot of questions is too many access points bad? Kind of yes and no. If you're standing with your RF scanner or your client device and you see way too many access points, that could be one of two things. Too many APs in that area, or too many virtual SSIDs. So in your controller, you set up guest VLAN, Wi-Fi corporate, Wi-Fi office users, Wi-Fi for RF. So you might see just way too many virtual channels, and that will create and cause a lot of co-channel interference within itself. And I've seen that firsthand many times. You'll have, you know, the right amount of access points, but you have like, you know, 10 SSIDs on one AP, and that's just all broadcasting. So you also have to look at, how the backend is handled and configured, the VLANs on your firewall, your MX or your Cisco firewall or whatever firewall that you're using. So back to the access points. This is how I would have it typically set up. But like I mentioned, always get a site survey, because that is like your Bible, your certification in the event that you need to go to the vendor. The vendor's going to ask you, let's say you're having problems with roaming, you're having a lot of drops. You could go to the vendor and say, I'm having these issues. The first thing they're probably going to ask you is, let me see your site survey. And the reason why they want to see the site survey is because they want to know if you actually properly designed it. You had a live technician or engineer go there and kind of put their blessing on it, their stamp of approval. Because I've seen in too many scenarios where people just put up access points, and that just causes more problems than anything. And you can have a lot of access points in a warehouse, but it just really depends on how you design everything in your post assessment. So you can have an access point here, here, and here. That's fine, but you might only be transmitting, like less power. You might be transmitting only like 20% of your power. So your cells are really small. But if you design it incorrectly and you're going 100 and you're letting your controller do everything, then that might be an issue. So Richard and Mo, hope you got a lot of insight for this. So send me an email. And guys, for YouTube guys who are watching this, any questions, comment below. Like the channel, and I'll see you next time.